Hello and welcome. My name is Ikenna Azwike, and it is my pleasure to be your host for this very special edition of the World Circular Economy Forum, a conference exploring the relationship between the circular economy and climate change. Folks, this is WCEF+Climate.
Wella.
We have started destroying the same ecosystems that nourish and support us. To stabilize the climate and to protect future generations. This is an emergency because hundreds of millions of people are already on the front lines facing the effects of the climate crisis. And if we don't act now, this number is going to keep increasing exponentially.
Circular economy is the solution.
It is through green skills and education, as there has been a fewer use of resources and a cleaner means of production to create jobs and also limit environmental impacts.
Be more ambitious, do better, because today your decision will affect not just your future or your children's future, but our future as a planet.
We need to make sure that the people at the front lines get access to resources and the power right now.
There really is no more time to waste.
Now, how about that for an energetic international opening, folks? And the next 24 hours is going to be equally lively. We'll highlight the opportunities the circular economy offers for achieving climate neutrality, creating jobs, living healthier, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll have Beyoncé live in the studio to explain why she's calling her next album Circular Economy Love. Okay, that last one might not strictly be true, but who knows what may happen after this 2-day inspiration-filled conference is finished. We have a packed schedule with speakers from the public and private sector, as well as civil society. We want you to take part in our conversations too, and you can do that by using the Ask the Speaker button on the conference website. Okay, take a breath, grab a cup of tea, and let's get to work. In the studio with me is the Dutch Minister for the Environment, Stientje van Veldhoven. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
And our co-host, the co-host of WCEF+Climate, the president of the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, our Jyrki Katainen. Jyrki, thank you for joining us. Looking very smart.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Ms. Veldhoven, let's kick off with you. What is the aim of the WCEF+Climate? Why have you brought us all together here?
Well, I didn't do that on my own. I'm very honored, Jyrki, that we were given the opportunity to host this first edition of WCEF+Climate. And I want to give my compliments to Sitra, who has really been a leader in bringing this field to the attention. And why is it so important that we bring the content of the circular economy more to the global agenda and that we link it more to climate change? It basically 2 reasons. The world population is growing, and if we want to provide for 10 billion people and stay within the limits of the Paris Agreement, we cannot do it by focusing on energy alone. About 50% of CO2 emissions are related to extraction, use, production of our goods and services. And so we need to look beyond energy to resources. It's really part of the solution. It's about 20% of the solution, so we cannot ignore that. We need to take all of the opportunities which are there, and that is why it's so crucial that we start working on this circular economy together in the context of our climate ambitions.
Now, thank you very much. You must be impressed with having such a great partner, Mr. Katainen. Tell me, why did you start the WCEF conference back in 2017?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, Sitra launched the World Circular Economy Forum in 2017. The underlying principle of Sitra's work is that the future is built together. And this has been in the center of the WCF. This year is an exciting year for us, starting with the WCEF+Climate and continuing to the WCF 2021, which will be held in Canada in mid-September. The WCF is seen as the only truly global event focused on advancing the circular economy. It's a premier global event which brings companies, NGOs, and governments together into a neutral environment, and the only platform that approaches the circular economy from a positive aspect that it can bring. So thank you, Stientje, for a good cooperation so far, and thank you also very much for your kind words.
Thank you, both of you, for kicking things off. Now, another group that the WCEF+Climate seeks to engage is, of course, you, our audience. You may be watching from behind a laptop, still in your PJs, but it is your innovative ideas, your critical remarks, and your thought-provoking questions that will help make this conference a success, a huge success. We want to hear from you, and my co-host, Eefke van der Waal, will bring your input from your homes into our studio. You can also join our online conversation using the WCEF Climate hashtag on Twitter. Eefke, welcome.
Thank you, Ikenna. It's so nice to be here with you. And hi to your audience as well. I will have a very important job these 2 days, but you will have an even more important job, which is to ask the right questions from wherever you are, whatever location. Maybe you're just in the place where the Wi-Fi connects best, or in between houseplants, just like me. Later, you will have the opportunity to ask our high-level guests some questions, which you can do, like Ikenna said, with the Ask the Speaker button. So please use that. But for now, we would like to ask you a question through a poll. So sit upright, because I'm going to ask the question. what approximate share of global greenhouse gas emissions do you think the linear economy produces via the production of materials, products, and food? Is it 15? Is it 30? Is it 50? Or is it 60%?
What do you think, Eefke?
I'm guessing it's a lot.
Yeah, okay. And I think if anyone was listening very, very closely to Stientje, they may already have the answer. But it's true, our thirst for resources and products clearly has a huge and detrimental impact on our planet. But just how big is that impact? You can respond to the poll on your screen. And to help you out, here's a short clip that illustrates the challenge our planet faces and the solution.
We're living in a time of environmental crisis. Biodiversity is under threat, pollution is soaring, and the climate is heating up. But how did we get here? Well, it has a lot to do with the take, make, waste logic of linear economic models. So how do we change this? Well, there is an alternative to the linear economic model, and that's a circular economy. In a circular economy, materials are kept in use for as long as possible at the highest possible value. When we recognize materials' inherent value, we can design out waste and cut pollution. We can reduce the environmental impact of production and consumption, and even regenerate ecosystems. In a circular system, smart product design reduces the demand for materials at the source. That prevents waste. And by reusing all those elements as long as we can, we give the environment a break. So, can a circular transition solve the environmental crisis? Well, it's the most promising way forward, and it's essential for achieving our shared climate goals. About half of global carbon emissions come from the extraction, processing, and consumption of materials. Reduce that, and you cut global warming. Without circular strategies, we won't meet our climate goals. We need to complement existing mitigation efforts with circular strategies. They are crucial for achieving the Paris climate targets. A circular economy, a necessity for climate neutrality.
Well, you saw it there. About 50% of the total emission of greenhouse gases stems from the production and consumption of the products we use on a daily basis. How many of you got that right? Let me just check on my beautiful iPad over here. Well, almost beautifully, almost 50% of you got it right. So well done. Okay, very well done. Minister Veldhoven, van Veldhoven, you've been working on the link between the circular economy and climate change for a long, long time. What convinced you that you needed to prioritize that link?
Well, basically, there's two elements. I had the great opportunity of traveling to Spitsbergen with a group of 50 scientists at some point. And I was there in the middle of, we were walking with a team of scientists in the middle of this glacier valley, and I was there in a t-shirt. It was 14 degrees. And so that's when it really kicked into me that climate change is already a reality. And that it's really up to us, now each and every one of us, to start doing from the seat that we occupy what we can to combat climate change. And then if I combine it with some of the statistics that I was faced with the world population growing to 10 billion people in 2050, and if we want to leave no one behind, then we need to ensure that we can cater for them with the resources that we have on this one planet, and not the three that we would need if we would go on like the way we go on.
Yeah.
And next to that, it's a fantastic opportunity, because actually waste is a human invention, and waste is literally a waste. So much better that we can do. And so it provides for so many opportunities that I felt that this was an essential part of the solution for providing for humanity and also for reaching our climate targets. We cannot do it without a circular economy, so we need to start working on that right away.
Yeah, and it's always remarkable to me when moments like that just hit you, when you're literally facing them or feeling them. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Must have been. And Mr. Katainen, what's at stake if we stick to our old, dusty, linear economic system?
Well, it's bad for climate, it's bad for biodiversity, it's bad for overconsumption of natural resources, and it's bad for economy. So it's as simple as this. So if you look at all those three major crises or challenges, what is really a solution if you want to address those three crises and maintain economic growth, which is very important for social justice, for well-being of individuals? The answer is circular economy.
Clear. What's next then, Stientje? How do we go about this? How do we move forward if we accept that we need to embrace this link between the two things?
Well, I think that's basically two words: teamwork and action. And it's really fantastic. I think in this conference, we've had great conversations and great cooperation also with the Canadians, Minister Wilkinson, who will continue the discussions, but also Amina Mohammed, Frans Timmermans, Lisa Jackson, Janice Potočnik. We have so many people out there who really understand what needs to be done. And we need to team up and get into action. And I think that is also why it's so fantastic that so many people have added to our action statements, because we need to, it's important to spread the message so that we are all aware about the opportunities that there are there, but also that we start working in and start cooperating to get those, to take those chances and to make sure that we help partners that are not yet there, that would like to learn more about it, that we cooperate jointly, we can go faster and further. And there's fantastic opportunities. Only about 9% of the world is circular now. So there's a world to win, literally.
Yeah, I didn't know that, 9%. So leave no one behind. And you heard it there, Mr. Katainen, teamwork and action. Is there anything you would add? What else do we need to do going forward?
Well, if you allow, I would like to raise 4 points just very quickly. The first one is market regulation and trade policies and their position to create a favorable environment for circular economy. This is in the hands of policymakers. The second, the importance of global collaboration and cross-sectoral collaboration on the path towards WCEF 2021 and COP26. Third, ascribing value to the natural capital to reduce material consumption, which is a source of climate emissions as well as biodiversity loss. So there are a lot of things to do, but I'm very happy about the speed and enthusiasm around this topic now. So we can combine the crisis management and sustainable economic growth, which is very good for everybody.
There's really an excellent example. This combination could provide also for a new, let's say, industrial revolution. If you think about plastics, the European Union is going to ensure that a mandatory amount of recycled plastics is used in new plastic products. What if we do that around the world? What kind of job opportunities would that create also in the informal sector for collecting the waste that's now floating in our oceans and turning it into new, beautiful products? So I think if we work with these kind of solutions globally, we can make such a difference in all corners of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on a point that will be coming back later in the conference, this idea of creating recycling hubs around the world, boosting an entire new economy around recycling. Very exciting possibilities. Okay, thank you both for sharing your insights. We'll hear back from you, Mr. Katainen, later on in the conference at the global closing tomorrow. And it's worthwhile noting as well, everyone, that this increased awareness of the link between the circular economy and climate is gathering steam. The first annual meeting of the African Circular Economy Alliance is also taking place today. Okay, before we begin our next panel, a quick reminder to you all watching. If you'd like to ask one of our speakers a question, please, as Evka mentioned earlier, please submit your question via the Ask the Speaker button. It's maybe once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah, okay, we went straight. Oh, thank you very much, everyone. I continued blabbing on during the bumper, but luckily you didn't hear any of that. Okay. Right, even at the highest levels of government, the importance of the circular economy and climate action has not just been recognized, but also embraced. It's time now to hear from some of the world's key players behind that development. First of all, the European Commission Executive Vice President, Frans Timmermans. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Timmermans. You're frozen at the moment, but hopefully you'll be unfrozen. You're looking great, though. Frozen, you look great, so don't worry. Chile's Minister for the Environment and COP25 President, Carolina Schmidt. Thank you for joining us, Caroline. Love the glasses.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Keriako Tobiko. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Tobiko.
Thank you very much.
welcome all of you. Mr. Timmermans, let me go first of all to you. You're not frozen anymore, thank goodness. So, the EU's new Circular Economy Action Plan is one of the main pillars of the EU's Green Deal. It's very grand sounding, and it does sound promising, but how will the action plan actually ensure we reach the CO2 emission reduction targets that you've already committed to?
First of all, let me thank Jyrki Katainen, who was also on this call, for being part of the first circular, which we launched together in the previous commission. Now we're in phase 2 of this plan, and I believe it is working because there's a lot of uptake in the market for this. People understand this. You know, there's actually only one concept you need to remember, and that is we need to learn to live within planetary boundaries. That's the whole idea behind the Circular Economy Action Plan. And as it was shown earlier in the film, 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions is caused by the extraction of the materials you need for our economy. And if you look at the other life-threatening crisis we face as humanity, which is the threat of ecocide, which actually you could say is even more imminent than the climate crisis. 90% of biodiversity loss comes from resource extraction and processing, 90%. So we really need to change the way our economy is organized to make sure that we act within planetary boundaries. And the Circular Economy Action Plan, which addresses both the supply side of things and the demand, reached. Well, it's essential if Europe wants to stick to its ambition of being the first climate neutral continent by 2050.
Very clear. Thank you for sketching out the urgency there. Minister Schmidt, Chile is one of the front runners when it comes to including the circular economy in its national climate plan, or in more technical language, your nationally determined contribution, your NDC. How are you making sure that the circular economy does the basics, though, creates decent green jobs for people?
Well, hi, Ikena, Stientje, and everybody who is listening today. And congratulations to the Dutch government and to Sitra for organizing this conversation. First, I want to make very clear the strong relation between circular economy and climate change. Switching to renewable energies can make 55% of the reductions of emissions that we need, but the other 45% globally can be tackled only by changing the way we produce and we use products. That's why circular economy is so important to reach our carbon neutrality goals. In Chile, we are convinced of this. That is why we introduced the circular economy goals in our NDC, our National Determined Contribution. And we include 3 main issues that are very important: the circular economy component, the development of a national roadmap of circular economy in Chile, and a social pillar that relates all our climate commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. Because circular economy is very related to the social agenda that help us to provide decent green jobs as well as to reduce inequality. The linear economy is a major generator of inequalities. The people who has the highest income generates the most waste because, are able to consume more. And the people, the most vulnerable people that consume less generate less waste, but they suffer from all the waste impacts of landfills, illegal dumping, and, because all of them are placed in the most vulnerable communities. This is especially important for emerging economies such as ours. In Chile, through the implementation of circular economy roadmap, we have a goal to generate 180,000 new green jobs in the booming recycling industry, which is essential in the context of a green recovery after this pandemic. We can also reduce 90% of our illegal dumping that we receive in the sites, and we can recover that for green areas for the community.
Minister
One
Schmidt,
of the key elements to make sure
the target that you spelled out there.
Of decent jobs. Sir,
I was just going to say thank you very much, because I think that was a very concrete target. 180,000 new decent green jobs is exactly what that's your ambition. I think that's very clear. Let me go to Cabinet Secretary Tobiko. Kenya is working towards a more circular waste management bill, as well as developing its extended producer responsibility scheme. And you've also taken the step of literally banning plastic bags. If I put myself in the shoes of the average Kenyan, though, the question I have is, how is any of that actually helping me?
Well, I think the point here is that we are doing what nature was designed to do. In nature, everything is food for something. And that really is what circularity is all about. And unfortunately, our economic approaches and designs are linear, as has been mentioned. Now, ordinary Kenyans would ask, so what is in this for us? How do we benefit from these interventions, moving from the linear to the circular? And already we have put in place all the instruments, policy, legislative, including mainstreaming circularity within our NDCs, within our CBD targets, and also our economic blueprints. So we have to educate our people on the importance to the environment, importance to their health, but more fundamentally, to their livelihood. Circular economy provides them with alternatives. And when we banned our plastics 3 years ago, we saw a huge market in cottage industry, alternatives. We have seen informal sector, recycling and so on and so forth. So actually, circular economy, besides just being an important tool in climate mitigation and adaptation, but also provides livelihoods and opportunities for individuals, for groups, vulnerable groups, and more importantly also for corporates and business.
Clear, thank you very much.
There's a really beautiful line between, let's say, what you all three have said. And I loved your comment, everything is food for something. Mm-hmm. And that combines with the fact that Frans Timmermans said, basically for our biodiversity crisis, circular economy is not part of the puzzle, it is the puzzle. If it's 90% which is affected. And it's not just a puzzle for biodiversity, but it's also a social puzzle. And it's fantastic to see in Chile how this is really delivering concrete jobs, and fantastic to have such a concrete goal, such a concrete target.
But how do we go from those goals and those ambitions to concrete action, Minister?
Well, I think Minister from Chile and Mr. Tobiko already outlined it. The NDCs, I think, are the right instrument. The NDCs is where we all put our policy goals together in a coherent approach that aims to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals. And so we need to connect policymakers, and companies, financial institutions. We have to bring that all together, and we have to share our best practices and work together to get this ball rolling ever more quickly, because we are running out of time.
And are those commitments, these NDCs, are they like written in stone? There's no turning back once they're out there, then governments have committed to them?
Well, we have all committed to the Paris Agreement. And if we want to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, we cannot do this without a circular economy. So yes, that commitment is firm. And I think that gives a very clear direction, also certainty for businesses and consumers alike, that they know that this is the direction that we are taking. And I think it's important because it demands investments, it also demands policies, so you need a long-term strategy. And circular economy needs to be part of that long-term strategy to attain the Paris Agreement goals, and therefore we have a clear direction to go jointly.
Okay. All right, enough from me. Let's see what the audience thinks. Evke, are there any questions in yet from our audience?
Yes, I'm very happy to see that our audience found their way to the Ask the Speaker box. I think this is one of the most interesting questions, and it's for Minister Schmidt. So if you would please. It's from Asha, and the question is, I think most people get the value of circular economy in principle, but how to make the switch from linear to circular? How do we bring society along?
Well, what we have seen is that when you give people tools to change the way they regularly, consume, they are very keen to change the way they live. For example, in Chile, we passed the ban of plastic bags in the commerce. And at the beginning, everybody was complaining about that. And it's because you go to the supermarket and you have to come out with the things on your hands. But after, they saw the big impact they produce because every single day they use a lot of plastic bags in the commerce. This law was elected by the people, by like the best law, the best public policy in Chile that year. In that sense, this helped us a lot to pass another law. Now we are forbidding all single-use plastic because of the public support of this. So what I'm telling you, when you give the policy, the people, concrete measures, how to change their daily habits and the big impact that produces, people start pushing for more of these measures. That is why it's so important, like NDC, our long-term climate strategy, that creates all our commitments, international commitments, bring circular economy commitment, because it forces governments to make these changes in policies, this law, these changes, and the consumers start changing their daily habits and want more change in order to produce the right impact.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, no, we don't, unfortunately. Thank you, though, for your answer, Minister. We talked a little bit about the EU's ambitions within the EU. Let's think a little bit outside, the EU's ambitions outside, internationally, I should say. Stientje, you mentioned earlier only 9%. What was the 9% figure you mentioned?
Yeah, it's nearly 9%, not even 9%, but nearly 9%, which is, the world is now for nearly 9% circular. So we have still 90% to gain.
Exactly. What are the plans to achieve that extra 90% and embed the circular economy in all the processes that we have?
Frans, I think the question is to you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frans, yeah.
Well, the thing is that if we can create more synergies between the sense of urgency that exists on the climate crisis and the need to go circular, then I think we can create also a global movement in that direction. We've just launched the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, which is attracting a lot of attention. And we're going to make sure this Global Alliance shows that in fighting the climate crisis, the circular economy is of great help. And also because it integrates all the positive elements.
Can you break down to me, what does creating synergies mean in concrete terms?
Well, if you look at how we want to reduce our greenhouse emissions, it is very often only focused on the energy sector and going for renewable energy, etc., etc. But if you don't incorporate in that the whole of the economy and make the whole of the economy part of that strategy, then you will miss out, because then other parts of the economy will remain based on resource use in a linear way. But if you can combine the two, then you create a movement in the same direction. And what is important to understand is that we're in the middle of an industrial revolution anyway. Yeah. So this industrial revolution, which is based on digitization, basically, also will help us to be far more resource efficient and far less dependent on extraction. But at the same time, we will also need to create a global movement of citizens, more than consumers, who understand that it's in their interest to look for products that have a longer lifespan, that can be repaired, that if they can't be repaired, can be recycled, to look for products that have a substantial, if not a complete, content of recycled materials, etc., etc. So also that we need to do at a global level, because the economy is global. Also, I believe we need to integrate much more of this into our trade agreements across the world. Trade agreements are the basis of the world's economy, will remain that. Trade agreements need to be fair, They're not fair as we look at it today. Trade agreements need to take into account the special interests of industrializing countries, and to make sure that in our tackling of the climate crisis, we do not curtail the possibilities of development of industrializing countries, but help them leapfrog over a number of developments that we had to go through in the Western world. And if you can then use circular economy as a basis of that industrial development, you kill a lot of birds with one stone.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe this dynamic relationship between these different subjects is of huge importance, especially for the industrializing world.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans. And I saw you nodding furiously there, Minister Schmidt. Briefly, can you sketch out how is Chile planning to contribute to creating this movement that Mr. Timmermans talked about towards a circular economy? Some concrete, let's say 2 concrete examples of what Chile's doing.
Well, concrete examples. Well, first, the importance of including this, as we were saying, in our NDCs and climate strategies has helped us to put certain things now, in our country. First example, our national strategy for organic waste, and this is something very important because more than 58% of the waste pack, the domestic waste pack, is organic, is food. With that, we have been creating a circular to recover our lands. So we have the organic waste now in the compost, in our national strategy, and that is helping us to use all this as an insume for recovering our land. Second, we have our extended producer law. And in that sense, this is bringing us enormous changes in the way we recycle products. Example, in the mining sector, and this is very important, we just pass and implement the law that all the the wheels has to be recycled. And there's a huge investment now being done in the country, for companies that are now in charge of recycle these, wheels, especially in the mining sector. That we have
great concrete examples
of recovery of the wheels that have to be recycled.
Yeah. Very clear. Thank you very much for that. In 2 different industries, the waste management and in the mining industry. Cabinet Secretary Tobiko, I'm hearing some great ideas. I'm hearing ambition. I'm hearing recognition of the urgency. How, that's at least from you 3 here, how do we inspire others? How do we get more African nations or nations around the world to embrace the circular economy? Give me your top 3 ideas, let's say. Top 3 ideas, Cabinet Secretary.
Yes. Besides mainstreaming circularity in our policy instruments and global commitments and targets, we must lead by example. And I like the idea that we need to establish a global movement. But that global movement must start at the lowest level of our citizens. Circularity starts with our own households. How our households, we call them house managers, handle separate waste. It starts with our offices, training our secretaries and messengers on how to separate and handle waste. 80% of waste in Kenya is actually organic, just slightly more than what Chile is. And thirdly, it is important to establish regional groupings, like in our case, the East African group, the African continental group. So we then must work together both at the global, the regional, national, subnational, and at the grassroots level. Public education and awareness is key.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, 3 good examples, but I love your first one, leading by example.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it when you said it. It's absolutely true. And I think leading by example, starting at home, is basically the second element that you mentioned. We can bring those 2 together also in public procurement. we make a big difference as governments in the way that we procure our services and goods, thereby really creating a market for new innovative companies. So I think bringing those two together also leads to green public procurement, circular public procurement, where I think we can make a big difference for all of those companies out there. And what I also wanted to highlight as really an image of how we can make a big difference. First, we had free plastic bags that would float around areas that we would burn in incinerators, creating a lot of CO2 emissions and other pollution. Now we have reusable bags, clean environments, and no emissions. That is basically what synergy means. It creates with one message, pay for your plastic bag. You can create all of these environmental synergies. And has anybody become less happy about the fact that we have no pollution anymore? No. Everybody's very happy about this. So there is room for change. And I think the plastic bag example really shows how simple it can be sometimes if we have also the courage, the political courage, to propose these solutions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for joining us. Now, we really appreciate that you took the time to join us and help show the crucial relationship between the circular economy and climate action. Eefke, back to you. I believe you have a special guest.
I do, indeed. I'm not alone in the studio anymore, because beside me is Joost de Kluiver, who is a Dutch entrepreneur and founder of Closing the Loop. Joost, welcome.
Thanks so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you here. Joost, we're standing in front of this massive pile of waste. I recently learned that waste is one of the biggest or the biggest waste streams that we currently have. I'm really curious what you see in this pile of vacuum cleaners, dishwashers. I see several things. What do you see when you look at this?
It is beautiful, isn't it? I definitely see the need for a business model. I mean, yes, electronic waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. But when Closing the Loop got started on circularity for tech, already some 9 years ago, there was already a lot of attention, mostly negative attention, to e-waste. It's problematic, it's polluting, but there wasn't really a lot of action. So what are we doing? So we thought, let's just do something simple. Let's start, create some energy. And that was actually the start for a service that we developed called waste compensation. And it works quite simply, actually. So we help customers here in the Netherlands or in Europe, for example, when they buy a new phone, so they add a new device to the market, we then collect an equal amount of electronic waste, completely end-of-life devices in emerging markets, markets that normally cannot recycle electronic waste. And that waste collection, that waste reduction, is then used to compensate a new device. It makes the new device waste neutral. So it's not perfect, it's not a final solution, but it's a great starting point towards circularity. And it works. We've been serving customers now for 5 years, all across the globe. And one thing I'm particularly proud of, the national government of the Netherlands has stated, as of this year, all devices, mobile devices such as laptops and phones, will be procured waste neutral. So that's great.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at this phone. I don't necessarily recognize the phone that you have in your hand. I think I'm from a different generation. But basically, you created a business model out of waste. And you also talk about this model of waste compensation. What kind of socioeconomic benefits does this create?
Yeah, thanks. Definitely, there's impact, but I need to stress this, and sorry for sounding a little bit commercial, but it's also about customer value, right? We help customers to align their procurement of electronics to their social or personal or company values. That's the customer proposition. But with that, we create funding. Waste compensation leads to funding, which actually allows us to buy electronic waste in countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, and many others. So because we collect waste in African countries, we fund local communities to safely and responsibly collect that waste, turn it into income. We create jobs and income, and making sure that that waste isn't polluting, isn't dangerous, isn't negative, but actually becomes a positive source for income. And of course, also education locally of the opportunities for circularity.
Okay, I was just wondering, do we have any images? Were they already shown? I believe we had some amazing video. Oh, they're already shot. I missed them. I'm going to have to look back on this. But thank you so much, Joost. Very inspiring. We're not getting rid of you yet because you'll be our guest in the next session. And I'm going to have to say this correctly because it's the session of the decent work in the end-of-use electronic value chain session.
It's about electronics.
We'll see you then. And to our audience, please remember, wherever our audience is, to ask your questions through the Ask the Speaker button. And for now, back to you, Ikenna.
Thank you very much, both of you. And it was lovely to hear Stientje and I both giggled when Joost said, yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? When he saw the waste. But that's true. We need to change that perception of what he sees opportunity when he sees rubbish.
Absolutely.
But we can reflect on that shortly. But first of all, I'd like to introduce the contributors to our next panel discussion. First of all, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, Inge Anderson. Thank you for joining us. Administrator from the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, Achim Steiner, and the Deputy Executive Secretary from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, of course, Owais Sarmad. A very warm welcome to you all to the WCEF+Climate. Okay, we'll dive in. Before we dive into the role of the UN when it comes to the circular economy and climate neutrality, I'd like to get to know each of you a little bit better. A high point of climate action was the landmark Paris Climate Agreement, of course, achieved in 2015, which was a result of 195 nations reaching a collective agreement, which is incredibly impressive in itself, under the auspices of the UNFCCC. Unfortunately, Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa could not be here today, but she does have a message to share.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, we meet at a critical time in human history. The global pandemic and ongoing climate emergency cry out for bold, resolute action. We urge all parties, especially major emitters, to look at how, in the coming months, they can increase their ambition and reflect this in new or revised NDCs. We simply cannot afford further delay or our current pathway. The circular economy plays a definite role here. It must expand if we are to reduce emissions across sectors, as it is an essential component to achieving climate neutrality.
Let's go first of all to Deputy Executive Secretary Sarmad. The UNFCCC sees circular economy as an essential component for climate neutrality, as we just heard Ms. Espinosa say. Could you elaborate, though, on what the role is of that the circular economy plays in implementing the Paris Agreement?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to join this forum. Very interesting, and with my colleagues who are in this panel. And as we already heard, our Executive Secretary had a very clear message. But in response to your specific question, the Paris Agreement calls for transformation of our production and consumption patterns, particularly in developing countries, or developed and developing countries both. We must produce more with less. That means circular economy principles. That is basically using fewer resources, more sustainable materials, and recycling the ones we have used. With respect to consumption, much of this is about changing our behaviors and habits and the way we have always operated. Think about the clothes we wear. We are all guilty of this, including myself. For every one of us. We all buy clothes, wear them a few times, forget about them, and then they're disposed of. Our secretariat, the UN Climate Change Secretariat, UNFCCC, is currently working with the fashion sector, for instance, to reduce the sheer amount of waste and emissions throughout the sector, and to find a way how to reuse or recycle the clothes we disposed. And since we consume those products, the onus is on the consumer as well as to for the change to happen. And taking a broader look, we can incorporate the circular economy principles and approaches everywhere. And all of it will help and helps in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. For example, waste from factories, farmers, households can be reused. Some of the examples we just heard
Yeah.
in the program, and those can be recycled and used as building materials. And that is happening everywhere.
So lots of
And as
initiatives
greenhouse
at
gas
the
emissions, which are on the
UNFCCC.
rise, unfortunately, can no longer be an output of our economic activity. We have to change our processes, underlying processes at the ground level. And we therefore need to accelerate the circular economy actions more widely to achieve a climate neutral world.
Great. Thank you very much. It's clear that you're on board with the circular economy message. I would expect and hope that from all of you. Let's move on to the UNDP. Mr. Steiner, you're working tirelessly with countries on fighting climate change via the climate promise. But can you tell me, how is the UNDP advancing the circular economy through its work on the Paris Agreement pledges? Oh, my screen's gone blank, but hopefully you're still there. Yes, I think you are. Okay, perhaps
I can hear you. Hello, Ikenna.
Yeah. Hi. Go ahead, please go ahead.
So, thank you very much. Great to join you. Love the studio. Hello to Stientje and Jyrki also. Thank you for hosting this World Circular Economy Forum. And straight to your point, when you think about development, when you think about sustainable development, the notion of a circular economy is integral to it. It's been our search for decoupling economic growth from pollution, but also from excessive resource consumption. You heard Franz Timmermans earlier on talking about planetary boundaries. So I think our challenge today is really, how do we mainstream in our economic policies, in our strategies for development, including meeting basic needs. You had Cabinet Secretary Toriako earlier on speaking about Kenya. I think Kenya, to me, where I lived for 10 years, is a great illustration, because few people know that Kenya is a geothermal energy pioneer, one of the largest developers in the world. It's also building the largest wind farm on the African continent. So when we're talking about circular economy, these are examples of how you combine access to energy with low carbon emissions. That's development. And I think, to me, it is basically the direction of the future. What we have to do, and that is a lot of the work that we do in the United Nations family in UNDP, is help governments set the right parameters. If you tax good actions and subsidize bad actions, don't be surprised if people opt for those. Poverty is a very real phenomenon that you can only address if you begin to make the right choices in the public common interest viable, affordable. And this is not a matter that the right choices are more expensive. It's how our economic system rewards basically excessive consumption. Remember the days when we lived with electricity tariffs, that the more you consumed, the cheaper your tariff got. Made sense for those who could afford it, but actually was illogical because it encouraged you to not be efficient about energy use. So these are just a few examples, and in a moment, Inga will speak also, and we are obviously working very closely together with UNEP to bring the circular economy and sustainable consumption production thinking into these national climate strategies, because they offer enormous potential for reducing emission pathways in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. You made the perfect bridge there to Ms. Anderson. How is UNEP working on accelerating the circular economy transition, as it were?
Well, you know, at UNEP, and thank you very, very much to Minister Stientje van Veldhoven, as well as obviously Jyrki and Sitra, for pulling this together. It's really important to get the message out around circularity. You know, in UNEP, we speak about these three planetary crises, and without going into too much, I cannot not say them. Okay, we have the climate crisis, which we're talking about. We've heard Frans Timmermans and many others speak to the biodiversity crisis. And the last one is the pollution and waste crisis, that toxic sludge of our own waste and effluent that we're putting back into the environment. That needs to stay in the economy. We're taking this stuff out of the environment, putting it into the economy. That's a good thing, creates jobs and opportunities, but it needs to stay there. These three crises are driven by unsustainable consumption and production. And the solution to that is obviously many, but key solution is circularity. So what are we doing at UNEP? We work on the science, obviously, and I was very pleased to hear Frans Timmermans just mention the Circular Alliance and Circular Economy Resource Efficiency Alliance that we just launched on the sidelines of the United Nations Environment Assembly. This is a an alliance that brings together, I think we have some 40 countries already participating, and we only launched it just a few weeks back. But across the world, we are seeing some, and if I have time, I'll just mention a couple of really good
Very
examples.
briefly, I'm afraid, Ms. Anderson, because I'd love to ask you all some more questions,
Yes,
but go
I'm
ahead
going to
very
be
briefly.
so fast. All right, very fast. In Ghana, for example, we have been working with the e-waste issue, which is a huge thing. Today, 95% of all electronic and electrical waste, much of it from Europe, is collected and in the recycling and circularity. We need to get much better at that, and we need to stop exporting our waste to poor countries. That's a part of our to-do plan. Now I'll stop so I can hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What do you think of what you're hearing? I mean, there's so much positivity, and it's very clear why we should do this.
Well, the UN is taking such a fantastic leadership role through all of these three organizations. I recently congratulated Inge on her fantastic new strategy for the upcoming years, and I think we cannot underestimate the importance of the fact that UNEP and UNDP have sent a joint commitment to our action statement, because we are talking about those three crises that Inger mentioned: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Mm-hmm. And of course, it affects all of us, but the impact on the global south is much larger than it is on the north. And so we in working towards a circular economy, we ensure that we have a positive agenda and that we are working on really leaving no one behind. And so it's really key, I would say, to the UN agenda, but it is fantastic to see also the cooperation between the agencies. And I think this really provides for us the platform of getting to the how. We now know that it's not an if we're going circular, we are going circular. Now it's the question of how. And there I think we have lots of best practices also to share and lessons to learn. That's why I think the commitment jointly made by the two institutions is absolutely the way to go. It needs to get into the NDCs, but we need to help them in the how.
It's definitely good that there's a joint commitment, but it is a common criticism of big organizations, the UN included, that they work in silos. The joint agreement is good.
They're not.
That is good. But would you say, look at all the, those are giggles that suggest that you know that criticism, you've heard it before. Is there enough collaboration across UN organizations? Mr. Steiner, go ahead. How can you stimulate even more cooperation?
I recognize the criticism, but I don't always agree with it. I mean, it is in the nature of organizations that they have a degree to which they focus on their mission and their work. But I think in the UN development system, which encompasses more than 40 organizations across the whole United Nations system, we actually work very closely together. If you take the Sustainable Development Goals, take decent work and economic growth, UNDP, UNEP, and the ILO, the International Labour Organization, are working specifically on green jobs. If you take COVID-19 right now and the whole crisis we're finding ourselves in across the globe, the UN's response to the COVID crisis, and UNDP has made the green recovery one of the 4 centerpieces of trying to help countries invest forward, build forward better. And I could go on. There are examples around forestry, UNEP, UNDP, and the Food and Agriculture Organization supporting countries on actually valuing forests and also compensating countries for maintaining forests, because they are a global benefit, not a global public good only, but a global benefit. And these are the kinds of examples that I think people often underestimate how much work happens every day. And this is why I remain optimistic. We are far behind in terms of where science has been telling us we need to be. But the United Nations family is, if you want, the connective tissue amongst very different countries. There are countries right now where 70% of the population on the African continent still don't have access to electricity. It's a very different conversation we are having with that country than with the Netherlands, with Germany, the UK, or the United States, where everybody has access to electricity, and it's a matter of getting to clean electricity as opposed to even having somewhere a plug in your house where you could plug in a light. So that is the kind of thinking that the Sustainable Development Goals also brought to all of us, connecting different issues, creating win-wins.
And about those win-wins, let's say, Ms. Anderson, what is the added value of this cross-UN organization collaboration in practical terms? Is it shared data? Does it make processes for financing projects easier? What are the practical added value? What is the practical added?
Goals?
Yeah.
It's all of the above and then more, because if we were all working in our stovepipes, well, that would be interesting, but not having the lever. But the UN reform that the Secretary General has rolled out, into which Akim referred, actually places at the country level a resident coordinator who sort of coordinates the entire UN system. But over and above that, and therefore can be the front window at the country level. But over and above that, each one of us plays to our strengths. We in UNET, we work on the science and the policy dimensions. We don't have the troops, if I may say, the many footprints of offices equivalent to UNDP, but that's what Akim and UNDP brings to the table. So having UNEP doing some of the technical work and some of the more scientific and maybe piloting elements and then lifting it together, which is why Akim and we signed an MOU as soon as I got into my office. He has been in that office before, so he knows the story, what we need to do. And we could see that if we work together, we can do so much more. Ditto with that.
But Ms. Anderson, why did you leave out Mr. Sarmad? He's looking really sad over there on the road. Why didn't he sign the MOU as well?
Because he is a convention, and as a convention secretariat, they do different things, and it's important that we respect the identity of each organization.
But
what
he's going
they
to make
do
sure
is
that
they
circular
enable
economy
the
gets a prominent
negotiations,
place at the next climate talks. So that is where it all becomes combined. And I think that is really crucial, because it is so important that all of this good work, which is out there, is also seen as part of the solutions to these questions that we have to tackle in combating climate change and in raising. It helps in raising the NDCs and thereby raising and achieving the targets that we've set for ourselves. So I think it is crucial that the UNFCCC works in this sense.
Okay, thank
Absolutely,
you very
but
much,
I have
everybody.
to add here, if I may,
Final word to Ms. Anderson.
I
Yes,
have
you
to
may.
add the Biodiversity Convention. I'm sorry.
Yes,
you have
absolutely.
to understand that the Biodiversity Convention is also having its COP this year. It's a very critical time. And what we are understanding more and more, that when these conventions do the right things, such as restoration of forest systems under the Climate Change Convention, we immediately get a boost in another convention, in this case, the Biodiversity Convention. So the integration of these things, that's very much what UNEP brings to the table. We are the proud host of 17 conventions.
Yeah, and it's very much in the spirit of circular economy thinking. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us. Very well. I think you must be very pleased with everything that you've heard.
I absolutely am. I'd like to concur with the last point on biodiversity. Frans Timmermans also mentioned it. And our Canadian friends at the next WCEF will be focusing especially on this link with biodiversity, since it is so crucial. Yeah. And one of the other elements that I really liked is the fact that it's highlighted circular economy is not just about recycling. It's also about repair. It's also about reuse, keeping things longer in the chain. So all of these elements are circular economy.
Very clear, thank you. Now, as our band of drummers keeps getting bigger and bigger, hopefully many more will join during the conference. Drummers being all of our speakers contributing to this ongoing rhythm of circularity. What outcome of the WCEF+Climate would make it a great success for you?
Well, I think if there is raised awareness, if we are going to see that in the next climate talks, we are going to have and see and use circular economy as part of the solution, I think that would be a fantastic outcome. And I hope that across the world, for example, on plastics, we could say we're all going to make mandatory, let's say, the use of recycled plastics, because we also need to create a market. Yeah. And that will create system change. And that is really what we need.
Oh, perfect bridge, because obviously there's going to be a lot more discussion about the economic opportunities that the circular economy also offers, possibilities to create trade hubs and so on. Everyone out there, I'm afraid we didn't have time to get to more of your questions, but of course in all the other sessions there will be an opportunity for you to hit that Ask the Speaker button. Won't there, Eefke? Yes, there will. I've been reliably assured by Eefke. Okay, a quick heads up on what you can expect for the rest of the conference. We'll discuss the importance of the circular economy in achieving the SDGs and climate neutrality, financing the transition to a circular economy, the value streams of plastics and electronics, and measuring our circular progress. And over the next 24 hours, you can enjoy short TV shows on our Circularity TV channel. See what we did there? So ditch Netflix, Amazon and Disney Plus. Focus on us, on Stientje, on Eefke, and keep the drum beat going.